Let's talk about a little fermentation. So, if you ever get in a situation where you're low in oxygen, after glucose forms the two pyruvates, I'll show it to you in the magnets over here. Here we have glucose, right? Y'all remember glycolysis?
Yes.
Glucose is torn in half. What happens when you tear a big molecule in half? Electrons and protons fly off and get picked up by NAD, right? To form NADH. Y'all remember that?
Yep.
We also form some ATP. Well, that's what they're showing here. NAD picks up protons and electrons, becomes NADH. That happens during glycolysis. And what would happen to that NADH? Rossi, hang with me here. The NADH, wouldn't it go into the mitochondrion? Okay, it'll only go into the mitochondrion if you're breathing, if oxygen is present. However, if there's no oxygen present, it won't go into the mitochondrion. It gets backed up really quickly. Some NADHs go in there, drop off the electrons. The electrons don't have anywhere to go, and so the NADHs won't go in there anymore. And what they end up doing is this molecule will actually take back the electrons. It took the electrons, it says, I can't get into the mitochondrion. There's not enough oxygen. So it'll give back the electrons and the protons. And that's what it's showing here. See how the NADH gives back the protons and electrons and becomes NAD again? And now it has this big arrow going back up because this NAD can go up to another glucose that's coming in and pick up the electrons again. And you build a new molecule here. What's this molecule called? It's called lactate. What's another word for lactate?
Lactic acid.
Lactic acid. This lactic acid is what causes your muscles to burn when you do a fast activity. Have you ever heard of lactic acid before? Mm-hmm. So if you do a sprint, you're running real fast, your cells are tearing apart all kinds of glucose, you cannot breathe fast enough to supply these mitochondrions. You're tearing glucose up so fast, you're creating a bunch of ATP. Meryl, where's your log book?
Oh, something like that.
I'm heaping ridicule on you. I told the class I would do that, and you arrived. Make sure you hand it in, okay? So, this glucose is being torn apart real fast. You cannot breathe fast enough so that the the pyruvates can go into the mitochondrion. So, the NADH, come on, mouse. There it is. The NADH gives back its electrons. The pyruvate can't go in the mitochondrion because you can't breathe fast enough. The pyruvate becomes lactic acid, and that makes your muscles burn. After the sprint's done, you stop. You're breathing as hard as you can. You're getting enough oxygen where the lactic acid can give up the electrons back to NAD, and now NADH can go into the mitochondria because you're spending time breathing. We call that an oxygen debt. You've built up an oxygen debt. You have built up a whole bunch of lactic acid, and that will eventually, after you breathe enough, be converted to ATP, to NADH, and then it'll go through the mitochondria. These will be converted back to pyruvates, and they'll go in the mitochondria for breakdown. But that's why you're breathing so hard, and we call this process fermentation. Now, in plants, if you want to know how plants make alcohol, basically, this is the process. I don't know if this is from your book or from something else. I think I brought it from something else. But the pyruvates, so let's go back to glycolysis. Glucose breaks into two pyruvates. The NAD accepts the electrons and accepts the proton, forms NADH. Follow the diagram here. The NAD forms NADH. Glucose is broken to pyruvate. We make some ATP there. Are y'all following? This pyruvate in a plant will not form lactic acid. It breaks into, one of the CO2s comes off and is given off. And what we have now, this molecule, which is called acetaldehyde, acetaldehyde, I guess is how you pronounce it, that will take back up the electrons from NAD if there's no oxygen present, and the protons. And now we have ethanol, which is alcohol. So plants don't form lactic acid. They have an extra step where they lose one of the CO2, one of the carbons as CO2, and form lactic acid. And form alcohol. And this is the alcohol that goes in an alcoholic beverage. So here's how you make alcohol if you want to brew your own beer or something like that. You take a plant like wheat or barley. For beer they use barley. You put it in a chamber. You suck all the oxygen out of the chamber. You feed the plant sugar, glucose. Or you can feed it sucrose too. It'll break the sucrose down into glucose. So in your chamber, which you can call it a still if you want, the barley's in there. You put sugars in there. The plant breaks the sugar down. There's no oxygen in the tank. You suck all the oxygen out. You close it up so no oxygen can get in there. The pyruvate breaks apart, takes the electrons and protons back from NAD, makes alcohol, and there's a bunch of CO2 in there. That's the bubbles that are in your beer. They're carbon dioxide bubbles. And you have your alcoholic beverage. So if you ferment barley, you get beer. If you ferment wheat, you get vodka. If you ferment grapes, you get wine. If you ferment cactus, you get tequila, and so forth. All the different alcoholic beverages are made this way.
Could we do this for a lab?
Actually, when I was in college, we had fermentation lab. And we spent the entire quarter, 4 months, we were on the quarter system back then, fermenting our own beer. And we drank it at the end of the semester, or at the end of the quarter. Tasted terrible.
So we
Gave you a great appreciation of people who make actual beer taste decent, because ours was awful. We actually had several kids throw up when they opened the fermentation tank. We had to clean it. Not about threw up. It was disgusting. What were you going to say?
Do you think the teachers would think poorly of us if we did that for a science fair project?
Yeah, I probably couldn't do it for a science fair project.
Aww.
You're not old enough. There's big fermentation tanks that are making wine. You put grapes in there, you suck out all the oxygen, you give them sugars, and they will make wine. Isn't that neat?
Very.
Okay, did you do poorly on that quiz?
No.
Do you want 100 to go along with it?
Yeah.
All you got to do is explain to me the process. You don't have to do fermentation. Just the process starting with glucose and going through the electron transport chain. And I'll mark 100 down for you in the logbook as a quiz grade if you can explain it to me.
Oh, wow.
We got today and tomorrow to finish this. Willis out.